Executive Director of Center for Independent.
Stories untold, voices rising and we're breaking the mold. Fearless and bold, we're taking the lead. Empowering minds, planting the seed. Sinar daily, shining bright. News that's bold, news that's right.
Assalamualaikum and good morning everyone. I am Tasing Loman from Sinar Daily and you are watching Top News today. And we're just a few days away from Merdeka and we're going to talk about something so oddly unmerdeka. Oh my god. The topic today is on the Freedom of Information Bill. How much will Malaysians actually be allowed to know about things? Today, I'm joined by Wathshlah Naidu, Executive Director of Center for Independent Journalism. Thank you so much for being with us today, Wathshlah.
Good morning, and thank you, Taslin, for. I think this is my first time.
Yes,
on the
you
podcast.
are. You are here for the first time with Sinar Daily,
Yes.
and I'm so glad you're here because we're gonna dissect every single
My
issue
favorite topic.
of independent freedom of information.
Yes.
And I'm saying here independent because like
Apakah erti merdeka?
betul, itu dia. We talk a lot about Merdeka content every month of August, and it's so fitting that now we'll be talking about freedom. Okay, so freedom of information. I think before we start, I just want you guys all to come with us and listen with us with an open mind to understand what's happening in the country. And this is actually a bill, so meaning to say it's still in the process of drafting, right? Before it is enforced into becoming a law. And when it becomes a law, we are all affected. We are all answerable and accountable to the consequences of this law. So Wathshlah, I love that you're here so you can explain to me and everyone watching, what does this mean for Malaysians?
Thank you. You know, that's such an apt question because CIJ is in the midst of, finalizing our Erti Merdeka video that we will roll out next week. But what does Erti Merdeka mean to us, and what does it mean to us as Malaysians, as public in Malaysia, in terms of having access to information, right? Tapi how do we look at it as a right, right? A lot of people actually probably wondering, apa ni freedom of information? Do we need information? Do we have access to information? And this is what we are saying. When it comes to freedom of information atau hak mendapatkan maklumat, it basically means it's not like we want all random information, right? We want information that is being held by public authorities, badan-badan awam or agency awam, because universally is accepted that information held by public authorities belongs to the public. Exactly. It doesn't belong to the government. So that's the first thing, all right? So if it belongs to the public, that means technically we should have access to this information, all right? The governments are caretakers or custodian of this information, and by right, they should make it available unless there are legitimate reasons why this information should be exempted. Okay. And when we say information juga kan, freedom of information, it doesn't mean we want everything lah. National defense information, we understand. We need to protect the public in Malaysia. That can be exempted.
Yeah, there are things that are generally understood.
Absolutely.
But there are also things that we'd like to know, right? What are the examples of things that are relevant to the people?
Okay, I think let's call you have a role as a media.
Yes.
I'm a civil society. We have perhaps different kind of information that we want, right?
Yes.
You would want information about every single policy, every single action,
Statistics.
I would want perhaps the same thing.
Yeah.
Let's look at the layperson, the person on the ground, the
Yes.
public. What do you want? What kind of information is needed? Usually, and then we've done this kind of mapping, looking
Okay.
at different people, what information you want. If you're in a neighborhood, right? What kind of information? You want to know why is there suddenly a new road being built?
Yeah.
Right? It's in front of my house. It's affecting my access. So you want to know who's building it, why it's being built, who got the contract, how much of the public funds are going into that building of that road, what is the environmental impact, can we have access to the environmental impact assessment, how long is it going to take, those are your day-to-day information.
Yes.
Or your children who are going to school.
Yeah.
Suddenly, there's so many years you wanted a new block. Tak cukup tempat, kan suddenly nowadays with schools. And then there is a new block, there is an announcement there's going to be a new block. And then you keep asking for information. Who is going to get the tender? What's the concession process like? Is it open? How much of the public money is going to go in there? And then you wait for 3 years, nothing happens. You still want to know, right?
Yeah. What happened to the block?
What's happened? Where's the block? That's the kind of information that affects our day-to-day life. And that's the kind of information technically should be made public.
Okay, that's interesting. And I think as we go on, we might understand better how these functions, but I like to go deeper into the actual bill, the draft, because it was sent for an evaluation and assessment, right? And the numbers do not reflect well on the draft. Okay, so Malaysia's FOI Bill, Freedom of Information Bill, just scored 29% and ranked 137th out of 142 countries. 137th out of 142 countries. So, can you just explain to us how bad that is?
We are bottom six, literally bottom six.
Bottom
right?
six,
Yeah.
okay? Not even top 10 low,
It's
six.
bottom six, right? I think we need to give a little bit of context of what this means.
Okay.
Right? Because this Freedom of Information Bill didn't come out of nowhere.
Yes.
It is decades of lobbying. Civil society has been, working on this since as far back as 2005, 2008, and things like that. And in fact, in Malaysia, we already have 2 laws. One is in Selangor and one is in Penang. They're called the Freedom of Information Enactment. So there's already a process, 2010, 2011. Fast forward, in 2018, for the first time, the previous PH government made the promise that they will come up with a Freedom of Information Bill. And then the subsequent governments continue this pledge and commitments, right? And then in 2022, when the new government came to power, they continued this pledge. It became a priority, a part of a manifesto priority, a commitment. And then they formed a pro tem committee. This is very critical for Malaysia, right? Jarang kita dapat multi-stakeholder pro tem committee to work with the government to draft a bill.
Okay.
So this was formed last year. So there's been years and effect. And when there were a few civil society groups in the pro tem committee, CIJ included, C4 Center, Article 19. So when we drafted the bill, there was a consensus within the pro tem committee. And we said, okay, this is acceptable. But the bill that was tabled was completely different, right? So then when the Center for Law and Democracy did a review, so they are a global entity based in Canada. They do RTI rating. RTI means right to information. So they've rated almost all the other countries with a form of either right to information legislation, freedom of information legislation, whatever it's called. They rate it, and they have their own standard. They have a methodology of rating, right? So when they got access to this bill, they basically rated it. So when they rated it, itulah, we ended up at the position of 137, right? But when you say 29%, that actually doesn't mean that in Malaysia we only have access to 29% of information.
Okay.
It is actually out of 150 points. That's part of their methodology, we only scored 47 points, right? And that sends an alarm bell, right?
Okay.
Earlier on, we were actually talking about what's the current government's 4 reform priorities.
This
right?
is one of them.
This is one of them. But a reform priority means you must have a substantive reform bukan a checklist. So the version that was tabled in July is a checklist. Because it's just a piece of paper at this point in time. It is drafted so shoddily, there is no right, there is no freedom in it.
Yeah. So, I love the fact that you said there is no freedom in it. But the bill actually states freedom of information, but there's no such freedom in it. Like, why and how are we actually going in the opposite direction? Because this is memang top 4 priority reform pledged by Anwar, right? And the unity government. We already failed the 10-year term for Prime Minister. That was not voted for change.
It wasn't passed.
It wasn't passed. Okay, that's the word. And then like we have the separation of AG and
PP,
public prosecutor. That's now hanging right now.
It's also with the PSSA.
Exactly. And now we have freedom of information. Like, why are we going into? What is this? Like, why? Why?
I've been an activist now for almost 25 years, and this was the first time when I saw a bill, I cried.
Wow.
Right? There's so much of, this is such a fundamental bill. It will change how Malaysians and the public here would be able to access information. It will change the culture in Malaysia. It's meant to change, shift from a culture of secrecy to a culture of openness, right? And as I said, we've done research, we've brought in experts, we've worked so closely with the Legal Affairs Division of Bahagian Hal Ehwal Undang-Undang on this, and they are also very, very committed. But what we got was a blue bill, not what the paper was written on, because despite being called freedom of information, everything else within it went to the opposite direction, right? Okay. You asked what went wrong. I would say 5 things went wrong.
Okay.
The first thing that went wrong with it was the fact that it's not about right to information. Right? It's not about freedom of information. It basically, even in the short title, the long title basically says it's a procedural mechanism, right? So it provides a procedure for you to be able to access information. But instead of it being open by default, it actually relies on all the secrecy provision, and semua rahsia-rahsia di bawah Akta Rahsia Rasmi or the Official Secrets Act, and every other secrecy provisions in other laws will prevail. And that's what it says in the law, right?
Okay.
So it literally means nothing, because it's like you're adding on a procedural mechanism, it's something perhaps you'll add on to OSA, and it's nothing about us having the right to access information.
It's just keeping the secret stuffer.
Absolutely. It's in fact going to make it tougher for us to access information, including information that we are probably already getting. Right? And instead of having maximum disclosure or proactive disclosure, and this was also rated by CLD in the RTI rating, it goes to the opposite direction, right? So it is almost like, instead of open by default, it's closed by default, and at the discretion of the government, we might, and it's not even we shall, we might give you access, right? So that's the first point. The second point goes to the access itself, right? I was just thinking about like what analogy would work here, right? Everybody keeps talking about, key to open access to document. So imagine you're given a key to your house. You've been waiting for this house, a little apartment that you wanted for many, many years. You get the key, right? Tapi and the agreement basically says, okay, this is the road towards your side, right? Tapi before you can even reach the door, right, you ada halangan. You have to pass through the guardhouse, go through management, many other access points that are where you're stopped and you're checked, right? You buka pintu tak boleh, right? Because there are different access that you have to have. You dah buka pintu, you go in, and then you see multiple other locks in every single door. So basically what the law has now said, the bill had kata, you first of all have to be a Malaysian.
Yes.
Okay. That means all the stateless persons in Malaysia, including foreigners, would not have access to any kind of information. You have to be above 18.
Which means people in schools
if you're doing some research in school, you're not going to get access to government-held information, right? Because you're restricted from accessing this. And then the third thing is you have to provide your national ID.
Yes.
You know, there's so much of sensitive information. I don't understand why the government would want to hold more sensitive information. And the fourth thing is they have prescribed purposes. You can ada tujuan, why, right? And then aside from the prescribed purposes, you still have to explain why you still need this information, all right? And the most critical thing in this denial of access to information is that if you meet the prescribed purposes, you get the information, it is still tied into criminal liabilities.
Yes.
That means you dapat maklumat. Say I'm an activist, right? Or even if you're a media, you get asked for information. You get the information legitimately, lawfully. You have access to the information. But if you and then suddenly you're looking through the information, elements of corruption, for example, right? And then you can't disclose it, because it's not for the purpose that you requested.
Oh my God.
Right? And if you do disclose it, of course, there are many other provisions because of the secrecy clause in there. You would be
Subjected to
fined.
criminality.
You'll be fined or imprisoned, right? Or both, right? That really limits access. Not only, it's like you are limited. First of all, it sets a bar. You can't even access. If you access, there is another bar. Right? How many bars are you going to cross? Right?
And then once you've crossed it, and you find out there is criminal elements or anything that shames the government, or
exactly exposes wrongdoing.
Yes,
absolutely.
you will also possibly be charged.
Exactly.
But like, where does the Whistleblower Act comes here?
That's a really good question, right? I think another critical point, because we're still point 2, is the fact that there is no alignment. This goes on to the first point you got, right?
Okay.
There is no alignment to say all other laws must align with this law. Technically, this law should supersede. You think of Sri Lanka, for example, in their Right to Information Act, there's already a provision which says that this law, the Right to Information law, will supersede other laws that would potentially restrict, right? Or in this case, Whistleblowers Protection Act should also provide the necessary support, right?
Yeah.
So I think this then comes to the third point. Kenapa this is not, it's something that, should be torn up and redrafted by the PSSC, which is we always say, and we are also always told, right to information or freedom of information is not absolute.
Yeah.
And we agree.
Yes,
right?
definitely.
There are many grounds where, say for example, personal information, national defense, or national security, or sensitive commercial information, or even information.
Even something so basic like marriage and divorce information, right?
Exactly.
Like,
if it's personal. If it's statistics, it's a different question, right? The personal information.
Personal cases of divorce and marriage.
Ongoing cases, criminal cases, ongoing other legal civil cases. And I think that's understood as grounds for this one.
Yes.
But in this case, the grounds are completely extensive. Everything and anything held by government, there's a potential to be restricted, right? Including opinions, advisories, and things like that. And then globally, the standards actually says there has to be safeguards. You cannot have a situation you pergi minta, they say, oh, actually, it falls within the grounds of exemption, tak dapat, right? What are the safeguards to say that this is not applied subjectively? So ada dua tests.
Okay.
So the first test is a harms test. Remember earlier I said information by default belongs to us, the public. Yes. Right? So the spirit should be, we should be able to access it, and the only time we cannot access it is when the government finds there is a harm, right? So it's the opposite. Okay? So here the safeguard is, yes, it might meet any of these exemption grounds, but you still need to show demonstrable harm, right? What is the impact if you disclose the information?
Okay.
Right? Itu pun tak cukup. There's so many safeguards, right? And we're also protecting the people in the civil service. Then you have to think about what is the public interest override.
Okay.
Right? I give you an example, right? Masa COVID, for example, and this is from Canada. there was a huge number of requests for information related to the vaccines.
Okay.
Procurement details, rollout timing, and things like that. So obviously, this is sensitive international trade information, and it would fall in most other jurisdiction. It will fall under exempted grounds. And then there is still harm, because harm around trade interest, but it in the interest of public.
Yes.
They disclosed it, but they didn't disclose everything.
Yes.
And this comes to what is also missing in our bill. They redacted sensitive information, and they said, although it may fall within the restrictive ground, the public interest override, because at that time it was critical for people to know what's the timeline for rollout, what kind of vaccines coming in, and this was in public interest. So boleh buat, you can redact. It's called the severance clause, right? Like partial disclosure. So that's missing entirely in this, right?
Okay.
And then there are two more points, which is basically about oversight,
Okay.
right? It's interesting because when we were saying empat promises,
Yeah.
we know one of the promises was FOI, and then AGPP, the separation of
AGPP.
powers of AG and the public prosecutor. Third was the 10-year
10-year.
term. And the fourth one is to table the ombudsman bill.
Yes.
Right? Now, in the FOI bill, the ombudsman is referred to in that bill.
Okay.
Right? So imagine you are tabling a bill and you are referring to an entity or a mechanism that doesn't exist. I don't know, again, how the drafters or the government can allow this to be tabled.
But
And
there's no mention of ombudsman. Like, if there's a test, you're supposed to refer to the ombudsman, right?
So there is a review. So the one thing that the bills caught high was the appeals process. Sebab the bills allows, and this is a general practice globally, right? You masuk the office, you meet the information officer, right? They didn't actually say information officer, but that's what it's alluded to. Or at the first level, it's a first instant application. You don't get access to the information. You can appeal internally.
For appeals, right? They got 61%. They scored 61% for that alone.
Because the mechanism, the structure is there, right?
Okay.
So that means, so that's a first instance, then internal review, then there's an external review, right? The external review is the one that goes to
the ombudsman. But Malaysia doesn't have an ombudsman.
Like, how do you draft a law and refer to a mechanism that doesn't exist?
Well, it's supposed to exist because
supposed-
it's in the promises.
Exactly. But you have to table that first.
Yeah.
At least to give the rakyat some assurance, right? It's going to come. What if it's not tabled indefinitely? This bill is passed on the presumption there is going to be a mechanism, right? And not a concrete one. It's not saying you create an oversight body, right? And then we have to ask these questions juga. Apa peranan oversight body? Why do we keep saying oversight body and we don't say ombudsman?
Yeah.
Right? Because in the bill, the only role for the ombudsman is to do the external review.
Yes.
Itu pun it's limited. What it says is, one, the so-called ombudsman that doesn't exist has investigative powers. And here, they've exempted, right, in the bill, they have removed, and they basically explicitly kata, the investigation powers of the ombudsman would not apply in the course of freedom of information review. Non-existent mechanism, and then you're already limiting the functions of the mechanism, and the mechanism would also be bound by other secrecy provisions. What's the point, right? And then we always say, we have to understand, FOI is a specialized issue, right? It literally took me about 8 years now to even understand the full scope of what is FOI, right?
Okay.
Now, the ombudsman function is to deal with integrity issues, is to deal with maladministration, two different specialization, all right? And the ombudsman, and like in many other countries, they give recommendation, all right?
Yeah.
So, and the FOI oversight functions basically would require somebody to have the highest level of clearance to access information, to conduct investigation, and to direct. Right? See the terms I use here. It's not tak boleh buat recommendation. If it's a recommendation, you think what? Any of the heads of agencies is going to this one follow? No. They've already said no. Why would they want to follow another recommendation? It has to be a directive to them to say now you have to disclose or you have to show the harm. All right. So you are two specialized role.
Yeah.
Two specialized mandate, right? And then on top of that, if you look at many other progressive countries, the role of the oversight is beyond appeal. Right?
Okay.
Technically, it shouldn't even reach the appeals thing because if you're working on the spirit of what is FOI, it's already about proactive disclosure. That means all government agencies must have a publication scheme. And in fact, it's not going to be very difficult. I mean, it's going to be a little bit challenging, but you look at every government website, sudah ada, right? Even my data.gov.
Okay.
Right? It has information. DOSAM, Department of Statistics,
Is information.
It's there.
It's all over the website.
Exactly. So it's just a question of streamlining what information should go and be made publicly. Now, and that's the role of the oversight. You work with the government agencies so that they have a publication scheme that meets the threshold. And then you monitor, then you help train the information officers. And only towards the end, you do the review, the appeals, right? If everything else works, the appeals numbers will go down. So that technically, then you have to look at it in the context of the full functions. So we continue to urge, right? Don't link it to the ombudsman. Have your own specialized agency. Right? Di Malaysia kan banyak sangat. You look at it just the last few years, how many councils have been, councils have been set up. Right?
Yeah.
Even just last month, somebody pointed out that the statistics bill that was passed has a new council to be established, right? With the Prime Minister heading the council. Right.
Okay.
And then it goes to the next point about the independence of this mechanism. Sebab you really need an independent expert to be able to deal with it because you're between the government and the public, right?
Yes.
That independence is going to be very critical. Yeah. And I want to touch on the fourth point why this is so problematic, which is the bill. And I cannot stop laughing, if not I'll start crying. A couple of provisions, especially clause 22, basically says that nothing in the bill may be construed as fundamental liberties under our constitution.
Okay, you need to explain to me what that means.
I know.
In layman terms, please, so everybody can understand.
I wish somebody could explain why that provision is in there.
Okay.
But what it basically means is that you're saying that you look at the bill, none of it guarantees you the fundamental liberties under Part 2 of Federal Constitution. If you look at Part 2 of Federal Constitution, it's about your rights.
Yes.
Your right to life, look at Article 5, your right to life, your right to religion, your right to
rights to...
I know, your right to life, it's not guaranteed under this bill. So it doesn't mean that all these provisions grants you that right? And I think it's really problematic.
What does that even mean?
I know, that's exactly my question. Why do you need to have a negative provision? You might as well just be silent if you don't want to say it expressly gives you the right. Most laws in any progressive state will give you rights.
Yeah.
Here you're saying, actually, this is not to give you rights, it's just to give you the procedures. That's what it's trying to say, right? But right to information or freedom of information is a right already, right? If you look at, say, Article 10 of our Federal Constitution, it talks about freedom of speech and expression. Now, how do you express yourself? How do you speak if you don't have access to information, right? I don't know why the drafters of our Federal Constitution left that out, because the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in Article 19 includes the right to seek, receive, and impart information as part of freedom of expression and speech. Even ASEAN Human Rights Declaration, for that matter, says the same thing. Right?
So meaning to say there is a chance where we can't be posting anything we want on social media.
That's not what, I mean, it doesn't go as far as to say that. It's basically saying, don't say this is your right under federal constitution. It doesn't make sense. Honestly, it really, but you know what is also very problematic, right? When when Parliament is drafting the law, it is, of course, interpreting the constitution.
Yes.
By putting a negative provisions like this, you're telling the court you cannot progressively interpret this. You already masuk campur in the ambit, the mandate and jurisdiction of the courts. How can you tell the judiciary this is how you should interpret? All right. So you're crossing the line between the division of powers of what is a state. So that is fundamental. I mean, that is like really a fundamental issue here for us, because the first question would be like, that's the first clause that I think people would challenge. Even I would challenge that clause, right? There would be a judicial review already. But you are basically saying right to information or freedom of information is not a constitutional right. I can read it in so many different. How do you talk about right to life when you don't have access to information?
Yeah.
Right? How do you talk about freedom of information when you don't have, I mean, freedom of expression when you don't have
Information.
access? It is given, right? You have so many laws that's related to information. Your Data Sharing Act. How can you have a Data Sharing Act and then you say that this bill is unconstitutional? It's not, recognized as a constitutional guarantee. None of this makes sense. You have a Personal Data Protection Act already,
Yes.
right? Data Sharing Act, Statistics Act, everything related to information and data. All right. And now you're saying this doesn't recognize fundamental liberties in your federal constitution. It goes back to my first point. I don't know how the drafters can live with this and how the government can actually table such a bill. And I don't know if I want to say this, but I have to say it's so shoddily drafted, right?
I'm just so confused with the constitutional part too. Like, why is that even? Why? Why is that
exactly.
even?
What are you trying to say? Are we trying to really, I'm looking at the bill and even reading through the CLD's review and ratings, right? It's almost like, what is the government trying to cover up?
Yes.
Right? Literally, that's all that goes through my mind. Like, why? Why? Like people are moving towards openness. People are saying that you need openness to address corruption.
You need transparency, you need to be clear, you need to declare, you need to everything. And this is like, no, nothing is.
Exactly. Let's protect the government. But then my question is, what are you protecting the government against, right? Corruption, right? And we've lived through this.
Yeah.
So many years, so many things could have been dealt with. One NDB scandal.
Yes.
I go so far, Tabung Haji. If we had that information years ago, we would not be in the situation.
It's so
disillusioning, right? After so many years, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I've gone through the reports and I've gone through the assessment, and I didn't quite comprehend the part of the Constitution until you're telling me right now. And I'm just like, what? Like, why?
Exactly. It's the why even put it in there.
Why is it even there?
Yeah,
like, what's
I
the
know.
relevance to it,
I
the
know.
whole thing? Like, and the audacity to call it freedom of information. It's just like, why don't you just call it like anti-freedom? Okay, so like one question I do have, but I understand that we don't even have an ombudsman yet. Like, and then you're talking about oversight committee and stuff. But who actually will be the person watching the ombudsman, watching the watchdog?
Actually, that's such a good. So there's a plan A and a plan B, right?
Okay.
So our plan A would be, go ahead with the ombudsman. I have to admit, as a pro tem committee, we had said fine, go ahead.
Yeah.
If that's the bare minimum we can get,
Yeah.
go ahead with the ombudsman, right? But there has to be some conditions. You cannot have like any random person.
Exactly. Oh my God. Putting, when we were talking about the ombudsman just now, the first thing that came to mind, who is actually even qualified to be
Exactly.
the ombudsman?
Like, it's like somebody with so many different levels, maladministration, integrity, governance, and now FOI, right?
Yes.
Where do you find this person? I don't know, lah, right? And I really hope it's not a political appointee. That has to be really clear. The next thing is, if it's an ombudsman, who is going to appoint the ombudsman? All right.
Yes.
Is it going to be appointed by a minister? Is it going to be appointed by a prime minister? Right. We don't want to go into another AGPP drama.
Yeah.
Right. On the appointment. Right. So this is the same question that's going to arise. Is there going to be a bipartisan parliamentary process of appointment? Right. If that is so, then the oversight lies with the parliament.
Yes.
Right. And if it's a bipartisan process, it gives a little bit more credibility, because everybody, they're representing the people. The parliament's basically representing the people from all sides. So there is some level of credibility. The same thing happens if it's going to be an independent commission. All right.
Okay.
The appointment must be absolutely clear.
Yes.
Who is, because that then answers who's going to have the oversight over the oversight body, right? So that is clear. And it cannot be, the prime minister having the oversight, because that means it's like almost like I'm setting the exam questions, right? And then I'm marking it, right? I'm grading it the same way. So it's like, if you are saying that the prime minister is going to appoint the ombudsman, the FOI commission, if we get that, then we are saying, I'm appointing you, but I'm also basically now telling you, you have the mandate to disclose information that I hold, right? But at the end of the day, I'm appointing you, right? How can you then have the actual power and the function to question me and challenge me? Because then I would potentially just fire you.
Yeah.
Right?
It's the same situation like during 1MDB, like
Exactly.
how the AG was just removed,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. So that's why the parliamentary oversight is going to be really, really critical. And if you look at some really interesting countries, you have to look at the CLD website, but also talk to some of the people, because we brought them all here to Malaysia. Sri Lanka has a really interesting process, right?
Okay.
They have a commission. It's not just one commissioner. It's got a few commissioners, and they represent. Say, for example, the bar will recommend somebody. The press council will recommend somebody. There'll be a civil society representation there.
Okay.
So it's literally multi-stakeholder process, right? With very clear mandates. I think they have one of they had until there's a new change in government now with the budget cut and all, but they really had a commission that worked.
Okay.
And some of their decisions were amazing, and it's such good precedent for the region.
Okay. So you were talking about an independent commission for information. Would that cost more?
It's such an interesting question. Of course it will cost more.
Yeah.
But the cost of not having one would
Is much
ultimately higher. Right?
Okay.
Because if we can just, the status quo now is OSA prevails over everything.
Okay.
And all the secrecy provision prevails over everything. All right. We can just continue status quo, right? But it will also mean Malaysia will continue to be riddled with ongoing corruptions, because we cannot. I won't say this is the only definite 100% answer to it.
Okay.
But we don't even have enough information to challenge the government, right? The public bodies, so the public authorities. We as public can't even be the watchdog. We can't participate, right? So that's going to be, the cost is going to be the 1MDB. The cost is going to be the Tabung Haji. The cost is going to be all the people who are going to be forcibly relocated because there's a new highway, or there is a development project, right? Or there is a data center that is, just within
being constructed, and you have no
idea.
Suddenly there's a huge building, and you had no chance of protesting or
what's the environmental impact?
Yes.
Right? The real cost is always going to be higher. So yes, there is going to be a cost implication in setting up an independent commission. But if the independent commission does its job, the government sets up the appropriate infrastructure, I won't say just the government, all public authority or bodies set up the right infrastructure to come up with their publication scheme, long run, this cost will be manageable, right? And when we talk about cost, the money comes from the public,
Yes.
right? It is from the public sport. We pay taxes, you know. So as I'm paying for the the civil service or the government or the public authorities and public bodies, I want access to the information that belongs to me.
Yes.
So that's the cost that's worth bearing, right? Because it's also a cost that could prevent larger issues, larger corruption, billions of funds are going into these development, infrastructure, things that would have broader implication on us. So I want to know that information.
I think something so simple right now that everybody is feeling is the fact that data centers are mushrooming all over the country, right?
Yeah.
Especially Selangor, and you see it in Johor. That would be it, right? Like just the fact that, did you know there is a construction happening next door? And no, you didn't, because you didn't get the right to the information, and you didn't
Exactly.
have the right to protest against it because you didn't have the proper information.
And you still don't have the proper information sebab you don't know can all the neighborhoods with data centers already there or coming up have access to the social impact assessment or the environmental impact assessment? Do they understand what this means long term? Do we even have access? These are all international agreements, right? Do we have access to this agreement, especially when it comes to issues around our own data?
Yeah.
What is being, who is going to ultimately have access to our data, right? What is the environmental impact when it's so highly going to be dependent on resources here in Malaysia? So yes, investment's great, but investment must also be transparent.
Not only that, is it worth it in general at the cost of the people, right?
That's the evaluation that the public will have to make, but they would also have to make that decision or that evaluation on the basis of information they're able to access.
And right now,
Yeah.
if this is passed, it'll be even way harder to even just get
The word, absolutely. This is also going to already, because it's so, the purpose is so prescribed.
Yes.
That it will limit our access to multiple types of information that we are probably already getting.
Yeah.
But now you're going to have to show purpose.
And like, if you're just like, it's fine, the people will definitely, this is just like, I feel like this exploits people who are just like half interested in things. Like, you know what I mean? Like, people who put up like after 50% of effort, you're just like, if there's more. And like once I reach 100%, there's like another 50% of consequences that may
Exactly.
occur, that I may be put to jail. Like, why do I even bother, right?
And it creates two impact. One, it continues to build this distrust that we have in government.
Yes.
Right? Because the trust deficit can be really low. Because you're not having the access to information, right? And then it opens up to all this, this misinformation, disinformation, that we now look to a different source, which is our social media.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
it feels like we're going back, like before social media came into power, we relied heavily on newspapers, traditional media, newspapers and TV broadcasting, right? And the people were like, I don't trust the government. We're all fed through the media, mainstream media. We're fed. Now that there's social media, I feel like people have other options, but it doesn't mean it's legitimate or verified, right?
Exactly.
But now it plays a bigger role for the official media platforms to be the check and balance to social media, because if you check, official media are not allowed to lie, and I mean the whole difference is just the angle or the type of stories that are pushed. But what I'm saying here is there's there's two sides of checking and verifying. And if you don't trust the media or social media, you can actually go yourself and get the real information to cross-check all platforms.
Exactly. Yeah.
And now it's just like people can actually make things up on social media, which they are now, but there are no efforts to verify it further because of the law, because of the bill, potential law.
Exactly. Because there's also an additional clause, like clause 6 sub 2,
Okay.
which basically says, it talks about the purposes, right? The prescribed purposes, and it also says nothing in here means and it also talks about media's access or journalists' access.
Yes.
And it also says nothing in this actually means there's a right to access. So it still goes back to a discretionary purpose, right? So I can still request. You are the procedure. You can still go to the house. You have the road. I can still go to the government agencies, but because of the prescribed purpose and because you're not guaranteed the right, you're not going to get that information. And in order they just keep repeating that. There's like this whole thing, like the explanatory statements and all the various clauses that actually talks about OSA and the secrecy provisions and other laws. So that's like a recurring theme. And then if itu pun tak cukup, then they add on, right? The 6 sub 2 and clause 22. Oh, none of this is actually a fundamental guarantee under the Constitution. Like, I don't know how many more times they want to tell us that actually you're not really going to get access to information. This is just a procedure. It's like OSA is here, right? But we'll show you the way you can actually try to access information that's perhaps not covered under OSA, which you can actually technically already get in most websites nowadays already, right? It's the information that should not be under OSA because of the public interest override, and because actually half the time the information there is no harm in disclosing it, right? Just to you go to many government meetings and then you get the meeting report or something, and then there's a rahsia. Right? Why should it be rahsia? Right? It's public information. So everything is rahsia without showing the harm. If there is a harm, I understand. It's an ongoing deliberation. It's going to be concluded in 3 weeks' time. Until it's concluded, it's rahsia. But after 3 weeks, disclose lah. Dah habis the meeting, right?
Okay, so one question before we end. I mean, we're going to end with the conclusion, but this is one question before we head to the conclusion. How has the MPs and politicians been towards FOI when discussing with you and engaging with you guys?
It's a interesting thing, right? Because as we said, we've been engaging with the MPs with different states since 2005, 2008, right?
Wow.
First time ever when Selangor and Penang. 2008 when Selangor and Penang had a change in government, right? And they were so open. They really wanted to engage. And CID, we actually helped them think through some of these things. But of course, typical thing is after a certain point, the engagement stops when they start the drafting process, right? And you don't get to see the final draft. So that's why sometimes you're quite critical also of Penang and Selangor, especially on the application procedures. But over the last few years, I would have to say, especially since 2019, there has been some very positive levels of engagement. Right? It can be sporadic, but I have to again give credit to Bayu. Regardless of which government change, they continue the engagement. Every year we'll have a collaborative event since 2019. Right? And then what happened in 2024, we worked together with Bayu to organize a trip to Australia. So we had 2 MPs there, one from DAP and one at that time was with the opposition. And we had representatives from Bayu, from the personal data commissioner himself joined us, and then we had at that time it was Mampu, now I think it's Jabatan Data Negara. We also had representative from AGC, right?
Okay.
So the MPs collaboration continued, right? After that, we had engagement with the PSSC on human rights, election and institutional reform under YB William.
Okay.
Right? So again, collaboration continued, a series of forums that we had and things like that. Since even before the bill was tabled, we had some discussion with the MPs. On the day the bill was out, we parked ourselves in Parliament in one of the MPs' office. We were briefing them. And then once the PSSC has been set up, we've had some discussion with opposition. We will continue to have discussions with the opposition, because we've had a lot of discussion with the PKR parties and MPs and DAP MPs. We will still want to talk to them. Last week, the PSSC called for a meeting with civil society, academia who are part of the drafting process and outside. They also called for an engagement with the APPGM on integrity, governance, and anti-corruption, and quite a few, and the chair of the Media Council, former Judge Tan Sri Nalini, right? So there is conversation going, right? And to the PSSC, I think our call is start from scratch, right? Because there's nothing to save. I mean, it's not a bad, it's a bad bill. There are some things, as I said, like if you look at CLD, penal provision, the process, the steps are all critical. So enhance what can be enhanced, please ditch everything else that cannot be enhanced and start from scratch. That's our call, right? And we will continue to call out to the PSSC until the next tabling, and I hope it will be tabled. We don't want, for us, every time the government changed, we had to engage with the new minister, right? And it's draining, right? I've got so many other things to do at CIJ. And
keep repeating the same thing over and over.
So we want this, passed, but by this government. But again, please don't pass just or any other watered down draft, because it's not about just having a law, an act. That doesn't give us the freedom of information, right? What gives us freedom of information, or right to information, is a substantive access. So the question is not whether Malaysia has a law or not. No. The question would be, are Malaysians or the public here able to access information? That's the test. The test is not whether checklist we have a law. The test is how substantively good is this law, and does it give us genuine access to information held by public authorities and bodies.
My God. Okay. I got it. I hope you guys got it. But that sounds extensive. And okay, is there a chance that this bill would actually just be passed out of the fact that it does give the anti-freedom element to the MPs and politicians?
Yeah, and I really hope, not just the viewers here, that we will talk to everyone we know, our family members, why this is important.
Do you think, but based on the bill and everything that it hinders, right? And with the behaviors of our politicians for the past decades, is this actually something pro for them?
This is going to help, right? Because you can now say, hey, we have an act. So, all these naysayers, hush.
Yeah.
We've already passed the law. You've asked for a law, all right?
You need to realize that this works amazingly for the politicians who wants to keep us quiet.
Exactly.
And keep us
down.
I
remember a couple of years ago when there was this whole series of new legislation and amendments to existing legislations was happening, especially on the Communications Multimedia Act, the Online Safety Act, and we had some concerns, and we took it to some MPs about what were concerns, and one MP who's now currently in the opposition said, actually it's very good. If it's there, when we come back to power, we'll be able to use it. That's the thing, right? Yeah. if it's passed in this current form, it is meaningless, and it means that if you're an MP or a government, a somebody working in the civil service, high profile, high ranking officer, if you have anything to hide, this bill will allow you to continue to hide it. Because, but if you are an MP or a Malaysian or a public here, report is substantive FOI bill or not.
Okay, I
Right,
think that
and
would be
that's
great.
our report card.
That would be great if
Yeah.
we can collaborate further and
Yeah.
look into it and show who supports and who doesn't support it.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then we can call it out.
Exactly, and this is where the public comes in, because if you go to CIJ's website on My Right to Know, you'll be able to find a link where you can write to your MPs.
Okay.
Right. So as a public, if you just convince your MPs to adopt a progressive bill, right, and the MPs must feel the pressure, and only then our report card would really make sense.
Okay.
Yeah?
So before we end, I like
Mm-hmm.
and should reflect everything here that we've talked about.
Mm-hmm.
So please.
For me personally,
Yes.
right, it means when we as public request the government for information held by these public agencies, public authorities, and public bodies, the default response and it's in the public interest to not disclose it, right? It cannot call for a freedom of expression that is really close to our heart, and that's fundamental.
All right.
Okay.
I hope people have learned a lot, because I have learned a lot from this discussion, and I'm quite worried if things don't change for the better. As a journalist myself as well, because it does have a lot of things to do with information. So thank you so much for being here, Wathshlah.
Thank you, Tasneem.
I
It's a
hope-
pleasure. Yeah.
I hope everybody can comprehend and rewatch multiple times to understand what we have discussed and how important it plays a role in our daily lives. So you guys, Selamat Hari Merdeka this weekend.
Yes, and fahamlah apa erti merdeka kepada kita.
Thank you so much. This is
Thank
Sinar
you.
Daily signing out, and don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms. Sinar Daily, MY. Bye, guys.
Bye. Bye.
Okay.